Hello, guys. This is a kind of different type of video rather than all the deck profiles, etc. It's again a little bit of a theory, but more of like a practice video. So I noticed that a lot of people, no matter if they're playing meta or rogue, sometimes have problems struggling in getting the upper hand in a duel, no matter if it's online or at your locals or at a regional level. Uh, I must say, I am not the greatest player, but I still know my tricks and how to get around, and I know how to beat certain good players if I play out things correctly and if I play at my top level. There are I should be pretty good compared to other good players. But I would like to give you guys some general tips for like beginner or intermediate level players, how you can win and specifically win with rogue decks like Necroz, etc. And how to like get yourself a little bit of an edge compared to your opponent. So the first thing is no matter what deck you're playing, you should really, really concentrate on learning what decks are running around and what techs are running around. And therefore, you should choose your deck compared to what is running around in the meta. So if you see, for example, there is a lot of invoked in the meta, you may even decide that, oh, wait, Necroz is a pure form is actually a good deck. Or if you see that everything is Eldritch and infinite combo and kill, 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 and you notice that you really need something to beat them, you may decide to run like 9 going second cards in your deck. And also, uh, continuing onwards with this, it's also really important to play these really good decks, the meta decks. Because if you play the meta decks, you will learn how they like function. You will be able to predict the most optimal line of play for your opponent, and knowing the most optimal line of play and like guessing what are the chances that he has an out in his deck, etc., etc. This should give you the possibility to comprehend how you beat certain opponents. So I would recommend, if you really want to get good at your rogue deck, play those meta decks for like 10, 20, 30 games. Like, and even the ones that you don't like, especially the ones that you don't like facing against. Because they will teach you like certain interactions between the cards that will give you an upper edge. For example, let's say this is not a meta deck, but for example, Plunder Patrol. If you read carefully, you will see that you can ash the summon effect of Blackbeard because he draws a card, because he has the option to draw a card and stuff. And not only is it important to know your opponent's deck and like the decks that you are supposed to run into, you can't be prepared for every deck, but you can be prepared for the majority. So you should know what Dragoon can do, what cannot do. You have to know that Dragoon cannot be targeted, cannot be destroyed, and can only destroy if he's destroy cards if he's summoned by using normal monsters. And that is, for example, something you should know. Or you should also know, for example, your own cards. So I'll have a couple of interactions here specifically for Necroz because you're probably here because you're interested in Necroz. So first of all, one thing you have to notice is that if you summon Herald of the Arclight, it goes to graveyard. It also counts as being sent to graveyard, and therefore you can, for example, go for Gravity Controller and get the search for your Herald of the Arclight. Or if it is detached as Exceed material, you can, for example, use it. So in this case, I'll be doing Kaleido Unicorn. And this will get us, for example, rank 4. And you will know if you detach the Herald of the Arclight, it will be triggered. So if you, for example, use the effect of Silent Honor Arc here to steal an opponent's monster and attach it to those, you can search with Herald. Same thing is if you like detach it because it gets destroyed, it would be destroyed by battle or card effect and stuff. And now for one that people will rarely read, but in specifically Necroz, this kind of win you games. I've won like 5-6 games because people didn't read this card effect. Zeus, as you know, has like this effect where you detach 2 and send all cards from field to graveyard. That's fine and dandy. But what do you do if you already like sent off Zeus? And in this case, let's add something off of this Herald, like Brio. So the Zeus seems to be pretty harmless right now, right? Well, let's say you have another card and your opponent like activates Nadir's Servant and sends an inst to pop your Unicorn, for example. Then you get to activate a Zeus effect, and you can attach, for example, a Herald of the Arclight to this. And this is excellent. Like I can't believe how many games this came up where people were, for example, to pop my Maximus or run over a monster that I have, just to be completely gamed by their actions because of this effect of Aezois. As next, there is also an interaction with Trishula that can lose you a lot of games if you are not aware of it. It should be the most classic example of misplays that can happen in Necroz. So be aware to read your own cards. So in this case, we hard opened the combo to summon Trish. And let's say your opponent has like a card on field and in the graveyard. So what we're gonna do is we are going to go for our standard mirror into Trishula play. This is the most standard way you can summon Trishula in any of the Necroz decks. You can also do it with incantations or whatever, but it doesn't matter for this scenario. So we want to activate Trishula effect and banish our opponent's cards, but then we notice, wait, they have nothing in graveyard, or they have nothing in hand. So this the thing between Trishula and Necroz of Trishula is normal Trishula can always resolve, even if they don't have any cards on field, hand, or graveyard. While Necroz of Trishula has to specifically, due to its wording, banish exactly 3 cards, and 1 each from their hand, field, and graveyard. And the one in hand is, of course, chosen at random. So in this case, you cannot resolve Trishula. And now, what is really popular to do is you can do cycle tribute Shurit special Trishula from your graveyard or from your hand, and then you want to like chain block the Trishula. And because I don't know, you're afraid of Solemn Strike or something. So the thing is, your opponent has 1 card in hand. And the number one misplay that happens to you, or the number one thing that can completely screw you over in Necroz, with Trishula specifically, is if they open an Ash. If they open Ash Blossom and you decided to chain block your Trishula to protect it from Solemn Strike, you will get hardly punished. So they could have a Gamma, they could have an Ash in hand, they could have a Skullmeister, and so that means they have like 9 possible hand traps where they can like stop Trishula from happening while also getting rid of the advantage that you would get off of Shurit. So if you see your opponent has exactly one card in hand, you have to use the effect of Trishula as Chainlink 2. Because otherwise, you're playing into one of 9 cards. Maybe even he has like a DD Crow or something and can like just discard it. But in that case, you're fucked anyways. So keep in mind when using Trishula that this can happen. Another thing that can happen is you are facing specifically against Dragon Link, and your opponent decides to summon seals here. Don't wonder about the card, the weird card in the extra deck. I'll explain it maybe later. I'm not sure yet though. But your opponent has summoned seals, in this case in the extra monster zone. And you go and think like, cool, they just sealed past. So we're gonna get ourselves this because we would have excavated it anyways. And then you want to do the standard Unicorn Kaleido play because you want to like take care of advantage. And because you think like, oh, this is an extra deck monster, it's completely fine. You're gonna just Kaleido Unicorn and then just send Herald of the Arclight because you're greedy, you want that card advantage. Good. And now what you're gonna do is like, oh yeah, I have my Maximus here. Let's go for Maximus. And then boom, they activate Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres and tribute itself to bounce your Maximus. Then you think like, wait, is that legal? Wait, is this not negated by Unicorn? No, it isn't because it's no longer on field as soon as the effect resolves. Unicorn only affects the field. Just consider this. So if like the monster removes itself from the field as cost or is removed by another card, let's say they want to use Savage to negate the Maximus Summon effect, or they use Dragoon to negate the Maximus Summon effect while Dragoon is on field, and then they chain like I don't know. If they activate another card that would get rid of Dragoon, like for example Forbidden Droplet or whatever, then the Dragoon would still be able to negate the effect of Maximus summoning, and Maximus would be destroyed. So consider that unit, or what can also happen if you play against ABC, is that people are going to activate the effect of ABC Dragon Buster, and discard one to target your Unicorn and banish it, and you think like, okay, fine, you're not doing anything. And then what they do is they chain ABC Dragon Buster effect, because it's on your turn, to tag out into the 3 pieces. And now that ABC Dragon Buster is leaving the field, it's no longer affected by Unicorn. So consider that. This is different to like Imperm or Droplet, because if you, for example, would Droplet the seals, then seals would be would have the status of being negated rather than being affected by a permanent effect, by a lingering effect. I mean, like by a field effect or aura effect or however you want to call it. And instead, it would be applied with this lingering effect of Forbidden Droplet. And therefore, if it would use its effect to bounce, it would resolve as negated. So consider that. And then here is another quick interaction that you have to like know if you're playing Necroz. And that is, let's say you open, for example, you get Cycle and Unicorn and Brio. Like, let's go for Brio and then add ourselves like a Klaus in this hand, and then Klaus adds us a Cycle in technically, but we already hard drew it, so instead we are going to search Kaleido. So one thing that you can do is you will cycle, and your opponent will be like, I don't want this Unicorn to hit the field, or this Clausulus to hit the field, so I'm going to negate this. and they negate it by, let's say, Dragoon effect, because I don't know. Then another effect that all the Necroz spells and traps have is all the Necroz spells have is if you have it in your graveyard and you control no monsters, you can banish it and one Necroz monster from your graveyard to add a Necroz spell from your deck to your hand. And this last effect is not once per turn. So if you go like if you have like multiple copies of it, you could search your other copies by like discarding them for Lord, etc., etc. Or if they get negated, you can get yourself more ritual spells. This will help you push through negates a lot of times. And this is like an interaction that you have to like remember. But keep in mind, if this gets negated by Mechaba, it will be banished, so you can't abuse this fact. Also, another thing, if you play Necroz, is these two spells here, they can be ghost spelled, and technically also Nadir Servant. So from all the ritual spells, the only safe one to activate usually is Kaleidoscope. And all these others are very susceptible to Bill. This one is also affected by Lancia, but yeah. Just consider this. Good. Let me think about a couple more misplays. Well, those are like most of the misplays, but now to deck building. A common mistake that I see with deck lists, and I wanted to like cover this specific list. This one is by Joshua Oosters. It is in his second of 3 so far episodes of trying to make Necroz good. And there's a severe problem in this list. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to come up with this solution. If you can analyze this correctly, what the main big mistake of this list is, uh, you get to feel good. Okay, so if you have not guessed it by the time that I gave it to you, the main problem of this list is it's not running considering the format. We're just running its deck to play itself rather than to play against opponents. Of course, you will get wins with this deck, but you have not considered that. But like the game plan of his deck is summon Vanity's Ruler and sit on it. Good, but that's a nice going first game plan. But what is your game plan against losing the dice roll into getting full Dragon Link comboed? Well, I don't see any game plan here. So the main issue here with this list, and I've seen so many people make these mistakes, is they rather want to play like tech cards that like just give you more possibilities rather than playing going second cards. So, for example, you really need to play cards that let you play in the first place before you can play cards that play. And cards that let you play, for example, are Forbidden Droplets, Hand Traps, etc. So we would want to remove like all the unnecessary bulk of cards that that don't ensure that you can play, and like get as much space in as possible. So, for example, Forbidden Droplet. Let's play triple Forbidden Droplet in main, so we at least have an answer to most boards. We also want to like cut down a Necroz Mirror because Necroz Mirror is kind of bad. We want to cut down a Necroz Cycle because we cut down short to 1. We got the Benton, we got the good Drytrons, and now we want to like consider also what our best cards are. And the main goal of decks is usually to use their best card as much as possible. And the best card in terms of this deck is probably Drytron Nova and Necroz of Brionac, as well as Pot of Extravagance. So, what is the best way to make sure that we can use these best cards as much as possible? It is to focus on opening the specific best card, the bestest of the best cards, as much as possible. And in this case, it's Pot of Extravagance. So, our main goal and the best way to see this card more often is because it's unsearchable, it has to be activated in main phase 1, is and you cannot draw any other cards the turn you activate this card effect, is to play 40 cards. So I've seen a lot of Necroz lists that try to go like 44, 42, 50, 52, let's go 60. And they are thinking like, okay, let's see less bricks. But what you're also going to see less is less of your power spells like Drytron Nova, Drytron Fafnir, Pot of Extravagance, Brio, etc. So what we really want to focus on is like play going second card. Like play first of all going second cards. Second of all, we also want to play 40 cards if possible. And if it's necessary and like judge every card by how useful it is to you. Like not in niche situations, but in general, how often what cards do you win with the most rather than what cards got you the clutchest wins. Like, okay, yeah, sure. My one of Harpy's Feather Duster sure got me a clutch win against that Guru player. But in general, it's not like the card that makes your deck. It's the card. It's like a card that can win you Saki games. But the card that makes your deck is, of course, like your Vanity's Ruler as your going first win condition, your Pot of Extravagance, your Necroz engine that has pretty good disruption and also good ability to break X-Direct based boards. But like you want to see your good cards, so just play 40. And if you can narrow it down as much as possible, you can play more going second cards and therefore increasing your chance to win the first duel a little bit more. And winning the first duel is pretty important, first of all, because if you play against a hardcore combo deck, let's say you're playing against an FTK that can play through one or two hand traps, maybe. The main bet you want to have is you want to, of course, go first, but you can't always go first because they are going to win the dice roll 50% of the time. If you're unlucky, even worse. But in general, like statistics say 50% of the time. And the best thing you can do to get yourself a good chance is to win game one. And one way to win game one is, of course, your end board and going first. And the other way is going second and stopping your opponent from getting out that devastating combo. And most end boards are usually meant for the opponent to have like this decisive edge where you at least get into a favorable position because your opponent's card because your card advantage is being depleted by having to out this board while they have their follow-ups, or you outright cannot play and you lose the duel right there because your card advantage is not enough to break the board, or you get FTK'd, of course. And all three things have one thing in common, and it is if you can disrupt the production of this big obstacle, you will have a better time. So in this case, of course, we want to run more hand traps like Ash Blossoms, and just look at the good hand traps of the format. We want to run Ash. Maybe we want to run Lancia, and even consider like cutting down your main engine just to accommodate your hand traps to be able to play through your opponent's stuff. And if you do those, you should be able to win way more games. I know I personally hate hand traps. I think hand traps are really boring to play, but credit where credit is due, hand traps win you games. Sometimes that one Ash Blossom can literally cause your hand that cannot break a board to win because he could not make the board. So that is, for example, important. I cannot stress enough, if you're playing a deck that is based on power spells, rather than 1-card combos, you really want to play 40 cards, unless you really are on a tight limit. But then consider it like that your deck is suboptimal, your deck choice is suboptimal if you have to run like 42, 44 cards. And yeah. And also, of course, always consider what is the better card. Is it a better card to play Pot of Extravagance, or do you think rather is it better maybe even to run Pot of Prosperity in this case? Because what, for example, Pot of Prosperity does over Pot of Extravagance is that Pot of Extravagance gets you 2 random cards, while Pot of Prosperity lets you look through 300% more cards or 150% more cards and cherry pick the best one of them. And cherry picking the best one of them, especially going second, is crucial in winning duels. For example, we go into a duel and we open Pot of Prosperity and 4 engine cards. Your opponent full combos you, and you're fine. You draw for turn, you draw another engine card. But you know your opponent, you don't have enough gas to play through stuff. So now we're going to activate Pot of Prosperity, and we're going to dig for 6 because we really need the out. And suddenly, 5th card that appears, Forbidden Droplet. And then you say, cool, nice. Now I have a fighting chance. And this is why this is something that you always have to consider in deck building. What is your goal? Is your goal to like just open a lot of cards and hope you can power through? In that case, Extravagance is good. Or is it your goal to see your specific power play cards and play, and then use those power play cards to play through your opponent by forcing them into a Zugzwang, and forcing them to negate certain cards. For example, let's say you activate Pot of Prosperity and excavate Drytron Nova, and they have like seals of Heavenly Spheres. Or even better, you like excavate a Cyber Dragon core, and your Cyber Dragon core would, and they have a seals in the extra monster zone, and let's say, yeah, Savage. So you're now going to now they know like okay, now I'm in a problem, and because he's like playing core, then you normal summon core, and the first thing they have to do, of course, is like negate it, and bounce it because they don't want you to have resources, or like just bounce it. And that, for example, like these core cards that force a Zugzwang are your one way to break the boards. That is apart from these power spell cards that just completely ignore the board, like Forbidden Droplet or Dark Ruler no more. So yeah, it's all in all, I want to say turn 1 is really important. And next thing about your that can get you a lot of wins is if you know how to side. You need to specifically build your deck to know how to side against certain decks and what cards you need to side out. Always know, for example, if you, for example, play like just memorize certain lines of play that you usually want to do. Like if you play Pot of Prosperity, you have to know what cards you want to banish. So in this case, Hyperion, Halqifibrax, 1 Arclight for the 3. Then we banish 1 Int, 1 Titaniclad, and the Tatsunoko Force. Or instead of banishing the Titaniclad, you would banish the Crocodragon and the Tatsunoko. So we have 6 cards we can banish, and that we always know that we want to banish. So in this case, we want to banish these cards here. That for example is important, or you want to know that you would like always side out an Ecclesia for example a Phantasme, or if you really want to go for back row, anti back row, you side out your normal summons here, and also your droplets, and know exactly that you're going to side in your Denko Sekka, your Cosmics, and your So if we would side, we can side in these and side out like these. And that is, for example, something that is really important because this will save you time. And in tournaments that are based around you having enough time, like every tournament has this time limit where you have to finish your 3 games in. And draws are really bad on the report cards, and you would rather want to have a win, of course. So we all know these games where it's painful and you like lose because you like play against a slow opponent and you're like and he plays like an off meta deck and you're like thinking, wait, okay, what is good against this deck? I need to side Oh yeah, he played a couple of spell cards, trap cards. Maybe didn't go second, but he also banished a lot of cards. So maybe he also Lance Figure. Didn't he link summon? Maybe I could put in this one Phantasme there. You always have to know what your opponent like. You have to know your basics in siding, specifically for the meta matchups, but also for like the up and coming rogue, your rogue problem matches. You have to know what cards you really don't want to see against them and what cards you want to see against them, and be really fast with siding. Speaking about being fast, you have to like be able to be fast enough in resolving your first turn combo so that you can save time. So practice your first card, one hand combo, your 5 cards first turn combos, and get them down as quick as possible. Like if you would play Dragon Link IA and you're playing against no disruption, I would not want you to combo longer than 5 minutes, 4 or 3 maybe. If you can like do the entire combo without interruption in like 3 to 5 minutes with random hand, then you should be good. And also practice your awkward hands. That is of course also important. As next, also really important if you're playing against a rogue deck, uh, don't ask your opponent what your cards are doing, and rather read them yourselves. Because if you ask your opponent what your card is doing, what his card is doing, I know it's really lazy. You think you can save yourself time, but you will cheese yourself out of wins. I don't know how many times people like ask, okay, what does Unicorn do? Can do? Okay, yeah, it negates effects of face-up monsters. Or some people don't even ask what Unicorn does, and then they go into a nightmare unicorn and try to bounce my unicorn and discard a card, and then I laugh at them. So always read your opponent's cards. Very important. Read every effect of them because sometimes your opponent is good enough to know, for example, that Zeus has a second effect, as I declared in the beginning of the video. Always know every effect in your deck. Know that prosperity limits you from drawing cards and also limits you from like dealing damage by having the damage you're doing. Know that this is an activate once per turn effect, same as Nadir's Servant. Know that Ash negates the effect and not the activation, while Ghost Spell negates the activation and not the effect. Know that Forbidden Droplet can send spells from your field to the graveyard that have been activated, so you can chain. You can activate Prod of Prosperity if your opponent negates it. You can chain droplets, put Prod of Prosperity from your field to the graveyard, and like a card from your hand to your graveyard and whatever to resolve droplets for basically free. Consider all of these specific interactions. Know all of those interactions. You don't know when they come up, but if these interactions come up, they can win you games. I swear to God. It it's and this is better than just knowing like, oh, I have this 1 second card. You're playing with cards that you're playing all the time that are good in general. But if you know these specific interactions, you will get this oomph that gives you the edge over your opponent. I think this video is long enough, So I will end it here. If you want to hear more theory about how to win games, I know this was more of like a ramble, but if you want to hear more theory about how to beat your opponent using rogue decks, do yourself a favor and tell me in the comments if you want to know like specific situations like how to beat a certain deck. I could also do videos on that. All in all, I would recommend you like follow these steps, read your entire deck A to Z, and learn all the cool interactions between your deck. You will be surprised how many things you will learn even after hundreds of games. So, all in all, I can only give you one advice, and that is not playing dual power Necroz because there is a special interaction between the secret forces cards, and yeah. Also, that was a joke. Still, play secret rare Necroz. Anyways, see ya.